A Mexican delegation stands in a reception hall. Their mission is one of the utmost importance to save their country from the throes of civil war and revolution. At last, the man of the hour arrives, Maximilian Habsburg, second in line to the throne of the Austrian Empire. He stands, waiting to hear what the delegation has to say. One man steps forward and begins to speak. They've come to offer Maximilian the crown of the Empire of Mexico. Hello, and welcome back to History in Focus, your one-stop shop for the stuff they didn't teach you in school. Today, we'll be focusing on part 1 of the short-lived Second Mexican Empire and its impact on the history of Mexico. Just remember to give freedom a ring and hit that subscribe button. To most people in the Americas, the idea of a monarch ruler seems antithetical. Several of the continent's greatest leaders, such as Simón Bolívar and George Washington, rejected offers to become monarchs despite having prestige and power to do so. The same can be said of Mexico. Initially, their War of Independence was fought for the establishment of a democratic republic. However, their top general, Agustín de Iturbide, declared the First Mexican Empire in 1822. This wouldn't last long, as Iturbide was removed from power in 1823 and then executed in 1824. Following this, the next 40 years were tumultuous for Mexico. By 1861, Mexico had lost territory to the United States, was catastrophically in debt, and was finishing a bloody civil war. In France, the recently crowned Napoleon III saw an opportunity. Knowing that Mexico owed huge sums of money to Spain, the United Kingdom, and France, Napoleon sought a way to turn Mexico into a bulwark against the growing power of the United States and increase French influence in the Western Hemisphere. There had been a small group of Mexicans, mainly from the conservative elements of society, that believed that the best way to save Mexico from the turmoil of the last 40 years was to make it a monarchy. These efforts were led by Gutiérrez de Estrada, one of the most prominent Mexican monarchists living in Europe. Using the friendship he had with Empress Eugenie of France, de Estrada was able to have audiences with Napoleon III. Ultimately, the discussion turned to who would be the candidate willing to take the throne. The answer came from the oldest dynasty in Europe, the Habsburgs. The second of 4 brothers, Maximilian was probably the most liberal of his brothers or uncle. He was rumored to be the illegitimate son of Napoleon II, son of the late Emperor Napoleon I. While close to his older brother, the future Emperor Franz Joseph I in childhood, Maximilian and Franz Joseph frequently clashed as they got older due to disagreements in policy. While intrigued by the prospect of becoming the Emperor of Mexico, Maximilian had 2 conditions before accepting the crown. First and foremost, France and the UK must sign an alliance to protect the new empire, and second, the people of Mexico must vote for his ascension. Unknown to him, though, this was all but an impossible task. First, the British, while certainly eager to regain the money owed to them, were not particularly eager to install a monarchy. Napoleon got around the issue of telling Maximilian that Britain wouldn't support this plan by just not telling him. Even after the ratification of the Convention of London between France, England, and Spain explicitly forbid any interference in Mexican politics, the French just simply told the Austrians that Britain was actually all good with it. They just couldn't publicly state that. The guarantee of popular support for an emperor was also, at best, an exaggeration of the truth, and at worst, an outright lie. When asked about a monarchist party in Mexico, exiled conservative president Miguel Miramón told Napoleon that such a party did not exist. Napoleon would have to manufacture the popular support Maximilian needed. The French admiral sailing with the international force to Mexico was given secret instructions to work with the French diplomat in Mexico to develop a situation that would force Mexico into conflict with the Allied powers, and then to take Mexico City, where they would topple the current regime and allow for the monarchy to be put in its place. A month into this regime change, however, things had gotten off to a bad start. Eager to get their troops out of the disease-ridden areas of Veracruz, the Allies agreed to the preliminaries of La Soledad, which allowed for the troops to move inland in exchange for acknowledging the current government as legitimate. France signed this accord along with Britain and Spain. Negotiations broke down on April 9, 1862, and France began what's known as the French Intervention. They quickly began a long march towards Mexico City, recruiting conservative outcasts in the process. On May 5th, just outside of Mexico City, in a town called Puebla, a smaller Mexican army devastated the French army. This would stun the world and would be celebrated in Mexico and the United States as Cinco de Mayo, which, by the way, isn't Mexican Independence Day. Nevertheless, about a year later, the French, bolstered by fresh reinforcements, pushed through Puebla and captured Mexico City on June 10th, but were unable to capture Mexico's president Benito Juarez, who had just fled the capital with the majority of the Mexican Congress. Meanwhile, President Lincoln had sent a warning through Secretary of State William Seward to Maximilian and the rest of Europe that the United States would uphold the Monroe Doctrine, and that any support of overthrowing the current government could lead to dire consequences. Despite these warnings from Washington, Austrian diplomats, Britain, and Juarez's Mexican government to not take the crown, Maximilian seemed determined to press on. Part of this stemmed from his desire to get out of his brother's shadow, and part of it stemmed from his desire to restore the Habsburgs to a more prominent position on the global stage. Part of it also stemmed from his wife Charlotte's desire to rise above her own station as a mere princess. Charlotte was the daughter of the King of Belgium, Leopold I. She was described as one of the most beautiful women in all of Europe, and fiercely intelligent and ambitious. A believer in destiny and devoutly Catholic, she believed that she was preordained by God to carry out his work. This of course meant ruling, and for that she would need a husband. Maximilian naturally seemed like a wonderful choice, and the couple fell in love and married in 1857. Despite these ambitions, when the Mexican delegation arrived to offer Maximilian the throne in 1863, the couple was less than impressed. Recognizing how conservative the delegation was compared to their liberal tendencies, the couple had doubts about how their politics would be received, and of course there was still the concern about the lack of British support. There was enough ambiguity to ease the concerns of Maximilian. So what about the United States? Well, Maximilian had managed to establish contact with Confederate agent James Williams, as well as famed Confederate spy Rose O'Neal Greenhow. Both reassured him that the Confederate States would win the war, which satisfied Maximilian's concerns about the United States attempting to oust him, though how he came to that conclusion as both an abolitionist and certainly hearing of the Confederate defeats at Gettysburg and Vicksburg earlier in 1863 continue to boggle my mind. On April 10, 1864, with cries of "Long live Emperor Maximilian! Long live Empress Carlotta!" ringing through the Castle Miramare, Maximilian formally accepted the offer to become the Emperor of Mexico. The reign of Maximilian I, Emperor of Mexico, was about to begin. If you enjoyed this week's content, please subscribe for future videos. Let us know what you thought in the comments below and what you would like us to cover next.